he will make you cry as well.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Hahn,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Sherwin Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
Stefan Bolz.
It's episode 268 of the Author Stories Podcast. As we march toward episode 300, thanks for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying all the shows that we're bringing you. And if you would like to help support the show and keep all of this great content coming, please go over to hankgarner.com. Click on the link to advertise if you would like to advertise your product or services. If you would just like to donate something to the show, if you enjoy the content that you get, there's a link over in the right-hand sidebar where you can drop a tip to the show. Thank you for doing that. Also, we'd like to thank our sponsors who faithfully support the show each week. Tales from the Canyons of the Damned, the very best in monthly pulp goodness, stories that are strange and are otherworldly. You can always count on something unique from Tales of the Canyons of the Damned. There's 20 episodes so far. Go pick them up. Also, thank you to our good friend Terry R. Hill. He's got 2 brand new books out. You might have heard him on a show just the other day. 2 Months with Harvey, his new book, all about Hurricane Harvey and his experience with it in his community. Go pick that up because all of the profits from 2 Months with Harvey are going to benefit people still struggling to get through the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. Also, his excellent book, Joseph of Bethlehem, one of the most exciting, in-depth looks at one of the most forgotten characters in the Christmas story. So go pick up both of those from Terry R. Hill. I promise you will be happy that you did. Also, ThirdScribe.com. If you're an author, you know that you need an author platform to connect with your readers. Readers, if you would like to connect with your favorite authors, they're over at ThirdScribe. It's a vibrant community that Rob McClellan and the good folks there work very hard to build a place where book lovers can connect with one another. Go check them out at ThirdScribe.com. Also, if you're looking for a great science fiction read for this holiday season or maybe a gift for someone, go visit my friend Nick Breaker. His new book, Essence, Septima, Book 1, is one of the best that you'll find. Also, Galactic Satori Chronicles. There's 2 books in that series. You will not go wrong picking up some excellent books by my friend Nick Breaker. Thank you for supporting our sponsors. Also, at the end of the show, we're going to have an audiobook clip, like we always do, from our friend Richard Cleaves in the Jason Crane series. Thank you for listening.
Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. Today, I am joined by one of my very best writer friends, and I really get to call him a real friend in real life also. Stefan Bolz was one of the first people that I met on this indie author journey, and that that then spawned this podcast and all of this stuff that's come out of there. And Stefan's one of those people that I've got to share a lot of experiences with, and we have I know he's been a great motivator and encouragement to me, and I hope I've been a little bit of that back to him. But when Dawn, who does all the scheduling of the show, asked me if there were any specific shows that she wanted me to that I wanted her to kind of make some time for, and I said, well, 2 of my best friends I always record toward the end of the year, and that's Stefan Bolz and Chris Porteau. So Chris and I will do our year-end wrap-up like we do in December every year. But Stefan, I wanted him to come on because it's close to Thanksgiving, and I just wanted to kind of catch up on the year, what's been going on. Stefan has a ton of news to catch us up on, and he's just one of my favorite people. So welcome to the show, Stefan.
Thanks, Hank. I'm happy to be there. It was a long introduction.
I know. I just, this is the problem. I can't shut up.
They made a song for that. You know that, right?
I know. It's really becoming a problem. But
I'm gonna give you this. I'm gonna send you the song. You talk too much. Do you know that song?
Yes, it was a Run DMC.
You Run DMC.
Yeah, you never.
It's not. That's not you. That's not you. But you talk too much.
Right. You never shut up.
It's Amy and I listen to it like 3-4 times a year. We just get it out on YouTube and listen to it, and then it's great. It's a great song. So, and it fits with a lot of situations. You know,
I can see you and Amy like dancing around the room. Yeah. Do you have a Kangol that you wear and your Adidas?
No. Oh my God! For Halloween, that would be so awesome.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes. Yeah. Next year, that has to happen. That has to happen.
Perfect.
Oh man. So right before I dialed you up, I was looking at Skype, and it looks like the last time we Skyped was December of last year.
Oh my goodness.
I know, that's crazy.
Right.
We talk on Facebook all the time and on the phone some, but I didn't realize it had, it's been a year since.
Right.
You have had a lot of stuff happen in this last year. First off, why, the Traveler, let's go ahead and get that out of the way. You've had some fun stuff happening with that, and I know a lot of stuff's still in the works, and we've all got our fingers crossed, but kind of what's an update on what's going on with the Traveler, and tell everybody what the Traveler is to begin with.
So the Traveler is a short story I wrote for the Future Chronicles, for Sam Peralta's Future Chronicles, specifically the Time Travel Chronicles. And that was 3 years ago. And since then, last year, I have a friend that is a local friend, Jillian Fisher. She's a location scout for independent movies that come up to our area, which there are quite a few.
Nice.
And she has done that kind of work for decades. She knows a lot of people. And I had given her the Traveler, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago, a little, just a single individually published paperback, small paperback. And she called me up one day or messaged me, and she said, I would like to purchase the option. And I didn't, so there was a long silence on my end because I was screaming inside for a while. And so she has a producing partner, Anjul Nigam, who is a veteran actor. He's been in the business for 25 years. He is now a producer, a writer, and he has just finished one of his movies that he shot up here is called Growing Up Smith, locally shot, and he has just finished producing, or he's actually in the last throes of producing a movie by Cuba Gooding Jr., his directorial debut that they're shooting. It was called Louisiana Caviar. And so we're in contact quite frequently via email. And so he's wrapping up the project, and then they can dive into the Traveler, get financing and try to make it happen. But it's a great fit. I love both of them. It's a really great fit with the producers. They share the same, sentiment about the story, and I know they get it. And so I have a sense that it will work. We're dreaming about Millie Bobby Brown, obviously, for the title role, but
obviously,
but who knows? But I'm sure a lot of people dream about her in a title role for a movie right now. But
she would be. I've never thought of that, but as soon as you said that, I'll never see anyone else. That's it.
Oh my God! Right?
That's it. Yeah.
Wow. I know.
Yeah. I know. And for those of you that don't know, Millie Bobby Brown is 11 from Stranger Things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect.
No. So anyway, so that's the. And The Traveler is basically the story of the book. She's 12 years old, and she is an apprentice in her dad's blacksmith shop. And after school, she goes to the shop, and he taught her, since she was like 6 years old, he taught her how to weld and do ironwork and forge and things like that. And she's now 12, and her dad has a stroke. And in the hospital, on the hospital bed, the last couple of days of his life, he whispers this word in her ear that she cannot decipher it for the longest time. So she finally knows what it is. She finds in an old dresser in his workshop a false bottom, and in there she finds a manual or a notebook written by him for her that has detailed instructions how to build a time machine. And so her story is that of overcoming her grief, overcoming, her basic notion that there is no time travel. So that's the story. And yeah, so it lends itself perfectly for an indie movie. I mean, it's a perfect setup for it.
You are a prolific short story writer. You write in a lot of different anthologies and things like that. You're also a brilliant novelist. How do you approach those two different mediums, and do you come to them differently? Like when you're writing a short story, is the approach different? Is the brainstorming different than it is for a novel, or is it just the same thing but shorter?
I think the short story and the novel start the same way, for me at least. They start with an idea, and then it's almost like a map that you unfold, like those folding maps. And then it depends on if it unfolds into a bigger map, or if it unfolds into a tight little map, like maybe letter size, or a big map. And that's really the only difference, because the idea for example, The Traveler, the short, like, what was that, 10,000 words, and let's say The Fourth Sage with 120,000 words, the idea was the same. But it's how it presented itself to me. I think The Traveler, I knew from the first 2 pages that it was very contained. It was like a 6-week period or 8-week period in the life of T, the Traveler. And whereas the Fourth Sage just took on a massive, proportions, but it kind of, the idea was the same. There wasn't, there's usually no, the only other thing was, though, that for The Traveler, I knew I was writing it for future Chronicles. So it was a 10,000 word max story that I had to fit in there, but it lent itself totally. I don't think it would have been a bigger, the story would have been told in 10,000 words or less, nothing more. You know what I mean? It was like a condensed in that, whereas others need more, but it comes, all of a sudden I start drawing maps or big maps of areas or buildings or things like that, and then I know, okay, so this is probably gonna get a little bigger, right, than a short story.
What about landing the story? Like bringing it to an end? Because one thing that I love about short stories and the medium in general is that you don't need complete resolution to a story. You can kind of leave the reader wanting more. You can leave them to kind of ponder the story for a while when they finish reading it, because you kind of leave possibilities for the reader. A lot of times in a novel, you really need to stick the landing, and you need to bring a lot of resolution, and you need the reader to feel like they've had a complete experience. Not always, but a lot of times, that's one of the kind of defining pieces of a novel, is that you can close the book and you feel like you've been on a journey and there was a destination at the end. Do you think about those things differently with short story? Because like the Traveler, like you don't follow her on time traveling adventures and all this stuff. You really leave the reader to ponder all the possibilities. Do you think about those things when you're writing?
No, the only thing I really consciously think about is the emotional journey that the main character has to go through. And I think for me there is some kind of a resolution, even if it's internal more than external. I think that for the reader, I always feel like I can't leave it. There should be something that there's closure with. Either it would be the inner journey has been closed and the outer journey continues, or the outer journey has been closed and the inner journey somehow carries on. So one of the two for me needs to be resolved. I don't like to have both of them hanging. You know, I feel like one of my writing teachers always said, give readers the ending they want, but not how they expected it. So, you know, it's kind of, right? I like that too. Yeah. That's why I'm remembering it. Right. One of the few things I remember from that time. But so one of the two I always try to resolve. And then the pondering part could be on the other.
Yeah, and I like that duality of the inner journey and the outer journey, and one being complete while the other, leaves you guessing. I really like that, and I kind of think, I think back to when I was writing Mulligan, and I left a bit of a.
You did.
There's this crazy thing that happens on the very last page, and you wonder what happens, and I was completely satisfied with that ending. And a lot of people were like, "Well, are you going to continue the story?" And I have a continuing story that I have worked on for 3 years, and I don't feel satisfied writing it because Connor Mulligan's internal journey was complete in that moment. Although his external journey leaves you going, "What?" His internal journey is complete. He found his answer. And to me, that's enough. And I've really not thought about the duality of that until you're just talking about that. But I love that. I love that concept. So wow. Do you know what the last sentence is in Mulligan?
Connor clicked on the television.
Yes. That's it.
Ponder that for a moment.
No, but it's the thing that happens right before he clicks on the television.
No, I know.
Is but yeah, that's awesome. Speaking of short stories, you released a short story. It's been about a month ago now. The Night of the Hunted short story. What is that story about?
I think must be one of my favorites. It started as a short story for Shapeshifter Chronicles, Sam Peralta's Shapeshifter Chronicles, and I really have no idea how this came about because I'm not a period writer, and all of a sudden I was in 1904 England and Victorian times, and this psychologist writes a report about a patient of his who is, for the last 4 years, she was in back then they still were called lunatic asylums. And she was his patient for almost 4 years. And he says that she was delusional, except for a few times when with incredible clarity, she described what has happened to her in excruciating detail. And he wrote it all down. And the last thing he does is he says, the first thing that the story starts with is, my suitcases are packed. Tomorrow morning at 7 a.m., the carriage will pick me up and will bring me to that place that she describes, which is this hunting lodge way in the boonies. So his last thing is he's traveling there to do research to find out if what she told him was true. Meanwhile, the short story tells the actual story that happened to her, which was not very pleasant. So this was my darkest story, I have to say. It's dark.
I got a very Sir Arthur Conan Doyle feel when I read it. You know, this you said you don't write period stuff usually, but I felt like immediately immersed. I was like, has Stefan been watching Sherlock Holmes? And like
I have.
I loved it. We talk a lot about where ideas come from, and there are plot ideas and stuff all around. If you just kind of listen and watch people, your imagination runs wild with possibilities of seeing people interact with each other and things like that. But sometimes, in the midst of all that noise going all around, there's some signal in that. And sometimes the writer's ears perk up and something is just it's something that is other. That is there. Right. And all of a sudden you're in the early 1900s and, there's a horrible person, on the loose and all of this stuff. What do you attribute that to anything? Like what is the weird thing that goes on in our brain that makes these imaginary people, become fully formed to us? And why are we, not on medication when other people are?
I think writing is probably one of the forms of therapy because you can touch on things that you would never touch on in yourself and work through them, and also have an outlet that is creative and other people respond to it. I think that's definitely part of it because I usually write very hopeful stories, but there's also, in some of them at least, a good amount of violence in it, and the main character usually goes through hell before they reach the other side. But I feel like that's us too. We go through patches in our lives that are dark, and we come out on the other side slightly more, maybe kinder or more thoughtful and more caring, but there are dark times where we just go from the darkness or through the darkness to the light, and I think that's a major theme in a lot of the writing. And it not only Stephen King, he's not the only one. I mean, he's a big one. But,
well, it can be a little cliche when people think or say, well, if it weren't for the darkness, you couldn't see the light.
I know.
But it's cliche because there's truth in that. Is that we really appreciate the hope and the light when we have been through something, and probably even more than that is we learn to empathize with other people when we go through something. Right. And there's something completely different that happens when I can say to you, I know you're going through this really difficult time because I've been there too. And there's something about standing with someone and sharing an experience that you've been through, and maybe writing allows us to do that a little bit, that we become invested in these characters and we realize that they've been through something, and the thing that we're going through, we can see a ray of hope in that as well. Right. Yeah. So the Night of the Hunted was originally published in one of the Chronicles. How many of those collections have you been in?
So I think the first one was the Time Travel Chronicles with the Traveler, and then there was what was the next one? I think it was Tales of the Apocalypse, Chris Porteau's Tales of the Apocalypse, with the Protector, and then there was the Night of the Hunted for Shapeshifter, and the last one now would be Nightmare, another light story. Nightmare in B movie. Artie Cabrera and yeah.
And Sam, but yeah. I want to get to B movie in just a minute, but you mentioned Tales of the Apocalypse. You know, we just had the second version or the second edition of that come out. But you have a really interesting connection to Tales of the Apocalypse,
right.
In the actual idea for the whole thing. What was that?
Well, that's really one of the coolest things in our community that we have with all the indie writers that we know, that you and I, you know, when we started to talk to each other, and then more and more and more people kind of, I don't know, there are probably hundreds now, right? That are, and on your page, there's even more. So, but the origin of that was a picture I took of Ember, my dog, 3 years ago when she was still a puppy on the rail trail. And the rail trail where we are is an old, it's basically a train tracks that they removed the tracks and is now a walking path. And it's pretty straight. So you can see for probably a mile straight, and then it makes a slight curve and whatever. So it was just a cool picture because the sides were overgrown with trees, and you can see and look into this tunnel, and Ember, my dog, my puppy, was in the foreground, and she was looking into that tunnel. And Chris, I posted it, and Chris Porto said, "Oh my God, I just got a story out of that. Can I use that?" And then I said, "Sure, of course." And then he wrote this story, about the zombies, right, with his dog. What was that called again? Unconditional, right, about the love of a puppy to its owner. And then he, after that came out, he got really good responses for it, and he thought, oh, why don't we make an anthology of animal stories during the apocalypse? And that's how the first Tales of the Apocalypse came about. And it was awesome. And then now you have a second one. He has a second one. You're in it, right?
Yeah, I have a story in it. And yeah, it just came out and is followed right on the heels of a B movie, which you have another story in. What's your story for B movie?
It's one of those uplifting, inspiring stories, you know, that you think about when you watch Nightmare on Elm Street or Jason or, you know, Friday the 13th. Well, for years and years, I had the idea for a screenplay that would basically be called Nightmare. And it's one of those titles that's like, you know, snakes on a plane, you know exactly what's going on when you look at the title. And so Nightmare was the idea that what if there's this main character, a woman who wakes up from a nightmare, and then she wakes up and she's alone in her house. The kids are with her husband, her ex-husband, and she's in her bed and she hears the door going open downstairs, and she's paralyzed. She's like this, like, you know, this, I don't know what it's called, but you can't move anything except your head. So she's like, oh my God. So, and then she hears the eighth stair on the staircase squeaking, and she's like, oh my God. And then her door slightly opens, and the moonlight has this sliver of moonlight in the room, and then there's this figure with this long blade, you know, and he's starting to cut her up, and then she wakes up, you know, and we think, okay, good, she's good, you know. But it's not, because she is continuously waking up from a nightmare and slowly realizing, oh my God, she can't get, you know, whatever, she can't get up. So she's like in the nightmare, and it's not just waking up from one, she's waking into another one. And so anyway, so that was the idea. I'm like, okay, there was a perfect B movie kind of slasher, you know, blood dripping and stuff like that.
So you've got the theme of this anthology is B movies, and B movies, you think kind of cheesy horror, monster movies, kind of things that play late on a Saturday night on cable, and
Right.
That are a lot of fun. When you approach a project like that, and someone who's curating the anthology says, "Stefan, I'd like you to write a story, and here's the theme," what do you immediately start doing? As opposed to maybe when you're walking your dog and the idea for one of your novels comes, and it's something that you kind of, ruminate on for a while, and it grows in you. How are those two things different when someone kind of tags you and says, "Stefan, I need a story about this," as opposed to the thing you create out of whole cloth?
The thing is, it's really interesting because I just finished a little booklet that's nonfiction about my martial arts background, and for my black belt that I just got in a couple of months ago, my Shodoshi asked me to come up with a kata, which is a kind of a sequence of movements and that are choreographed. And they're usually between like 1 and 2 minutes long. And they also, the ancient ones, the ones that go long, way back, they also have a specific meaning. They're usually mock fights, but there's also some philosophy behind it. So he asked me to come up with a kata and do a bunkai, which is the meaning of philosophy behind it. So when he told me the story, the task, I just saw this. I had one image in my head that was like the McDonald's M, the two arches that kind of meet in the middle. And I thought, okay, so this would be the gate where the hero has to step through to start her journey through that kata to come out on the other side more enlightened than she was in the beginning. So, but that was all that was there. There wasn't a whole thing, but it was just an image. The same was with the Nightmare for B movie. I was like, oh, my Nightmare story that I was thinking about already would probably be pretty cool for that. So it's just a little kind of like a spark that with the Traveler it was. What if there would be a story about building a time machine, not so much, what happens in time travel and going back and forward and whatever. So, but the actual act of trying to make something, but it was just a little idea. And that then, you sit down or you walk the dog, that's the next step would be walking the dog. And then, and then you listen to Dragon Force, and then the ideas come in. You know that, Hank. It's not,
I do know that.
You might not be Dragon Force for you, but it's similar.
It is very similar. It's so weird that the things that you lock onto, and you'll pick a song and you'll listen to that and it immediately puts you in the right mood. Mm-hmm. Rainbow in the Dark by Dio does that for me every time. Every time I could put that on, and when that guitar riff hits,
that is so funny.
I've never told anybody that before.
That is awesome. I love it. I have to listen to that. What's that called?
Rainbow in the Dark by
Rainbow in the Dark.
Yeah, it's got a really cheesy synthesizer part too, and I love it. I just eat it up.
I love it.
Yeah, it's so awesome. So awesome.
When we understand each other, Hank.
We do understand each other. It's creepy, when you were talking about visualizing this kata and thinking about it, you talked about the hero and she is a female. A lot of your writing is from the female perspective, and I've written a couple of short stories that are. From a female perspective, have a female protagonist. And when I've done that, I've never thought about it. That's just who the character was.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it was just natural. That was, and only, as a matter of fact, when I did the story for Clones, my protagonist is a woman, a physicist, and that's just who she was. And I never even thought about it till I turned the story into Daniel, and he said, "Oh, I love that you wrote from the female perspective." And I actually had to think about it for a minute and say, "Oh, I guess it is." And that's just who the character was. Is that something you think about at all, or is that just kind of what bubbles to the top?
I think it's basically what bubbles. I don't really think about it. I remember you asking me that question a year ago, and I still remember my answer because it was something that Amy's daughter Chloe told me. She said, she's 17. She said, "You're inside. You are a sad teenage girl." And I'm like, you're so right. You're probably right. That's
hilarious.
Anyway,
hilarious.
So it's. But the other thing is, what I really find interesting is that in two stories now. One was The Traveler, because The Traveler short story, until halfway through, because I do readings for classes. I was just at a school, 7th and 8th grade, and I read from The Traveler, and I read the first chapter. And then I asked, so is the main character male or female? And people are like, wait a minute. And it's 50-50. They think it's male, others think it's female. So it's not, it's really not, it doesn't matter almost to me, except for that we're still live in a society where a female hero is less expected than a male hero, which is crazy and sad. But I feel like, girls, especially that age, there's so much potential and the strength that they have. And but society is still kind of like, well, no, you can't turn out, you can't make enough money or as much money as a guy, or you can't be as successful as a guy. And like, that's not true at all. So I feel like I love writing that with a female protagonist, and I feel even stronger about it. The more I write about it, because it's just I think it needs to be balanced out for sure. So
I live with a house full of strong women.
Yes, you do.
Strong, sassy women, and if anything, I worry about not representing them well enough.
Right.
It's that anyone who thinks those things about women and all the crazy inferiority stuff that we all know is not true. They just need to spend a weekend at my house or at your house, and I think they would have a very, very different opinion, wouldn't they?
Yes, I agree, which is good.
Oh, yes, it is good. It's good. Let's talk about NaNoWriMo, because we are in November and it's the National Novel Writing Month. I am not doing Nano this year for the first time in, I guess, 4 years.
Yeah.
I am writing. I'm just not putting myself under that
scrutiny, right?
That challenge,
right?
And I have a lot of reasons for that, but I love NaNoWriMo, and that's my first book, Bloom, was a NaNoWriMo book, and so I dearly, dearly love the concept and the community and all of that stuff that comes around it. So just because I'm not participating this year doesn't mean that I'm not a Nano supporter and a fan. But what do you get from participating?
Pressure. That's really it.
Right.
That's really it, because
being accountable to someone, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, and to have that little graph that you can follow, when you upload your word count, it does something.
It's like a drug.
It's like a little drug. And I do have to finish this third book, It has been haunting me for 2 years, and I just have to finish it. And I felt like, okay, November is the month where I can give it a big push, at least push it to where I can be close to the end. So that's my plan.
Third book of the White Dragon series.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you know from the beginning? You knew that was going to be a trilogy from the beginning, but did you know how it was all going to end?
Yes, and that was the most exciting thing. That's the only reason I could push through it, because the first two were pretty easy to write, and now the third one, it all has to kind of flow together and make sense in the end. There are a lot of like individual little threads that have to be tied up in the end satisfactorily, in a satisfactory way, and that's hard. So I was kind of stuck a little bit, and I wrote a whole other book, the Sixth String, just so that I would write, but I just couldn't finish this one. And so yeah, this one. Sorry, I forgot. Now I totally forgot the question. See, this book does that to me. It's like,
talking about knowing the ending from the beginning.
Yeah. So the ending was very, very powerful. The first page I wrote, I knew the ending, and it was like, holy moly, that's awesome. And that was what kind of pushed the story forward, because it will be such a transformation from a character arc standpoint, that we're talking about internally and externally, and so yeah, that ending was there from the beginning, and it was definitely the driving force in the whole trilogy.
I hear people like Stephen King talk about
who's that guy?
I've never heard of him.
Yeah.
Someone dropped his name once. But talking about pantsing and really discovering the story as you go along,
right.
and I get the impression that sometimes he has no idea how it's going to end.
Right.
I almost always have the final scene in mind when I begin.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I'm writing toward that. Now, I may have no idea what is in the middle, but I always have an opening scene and I always have a closing scene. And the middle is very mushy and it's kind of a swamp. But, I can't imagine, just kind of walking down the story path with only the flashlight in front of you, and having no idea where you're going. Do you always know how it's going to end? No. For example, for my first one, The Three Feathers, I had no idea from one chapter. I think I could probably see maybe 2 chapters ahead, but that was pretty much it. It was literally a flashlight situation in the dark. And the Fourth Sage, the second one, the same. And I was devastated during the middle of it, because it was a long book to write, 120,000 words. And I felt like, oh my God, what if this leads just to nowhere? You know what I mean? It was like, what if it's just like, oh, hey, na, whatever, you spent a year of your life and there's nothing in the end. And I had that fear for the longest time, but then it kind of gave me this gift in the end. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. But, it could have gone another way, but it did. There was an ending, but I just I had no clue what it was. I couldn't imagine it in the beginning. It was towards, I think, the last quarter, it became clear, but nothing in the beginning. And I know I remember you talked to the Longmire author. Was that Craig Johnson?
Yes. And didn't no, it was Lee Child, the Jack Reacher. And he said doesn't he start with one sentence?
Right.
Like he buried the body behind the pine tree, whatever. Right. And that's from that. Oh, I mean, that is so cool.
Yeah, that's spooky stuff to me. I would be terrified.
Yeah, exactly. And then he doesn't do rewrites either, right? He one draft.
Yeah, one draft, and I think I heard him say that he gives the editor something like 3 edits. He said, so choose wisely.
Oh my God!
Yeah, we have a
funny.
saying for that in the South, and it's that he has large things that he carries around with him. But
right,
yeah.
That's cool.
Talking about the Three Feathers and the Fourth Sage, those 2 books were very special to you, weren't they? Not only that they were the first 2 long works that you had written, but the Three Feathers especially was a clear representation of kind of where you were at the time, and it really mirrors kind of your life and journey in a lot of ways, doesn't it?
Yes, I think it was. It was almost like, because I've been on this spiritual path since I was in my early 20s, and I was on that, that search that many of us are on, but some of us don't even know that we're on this search. Kind of looking for something that's missing, but can't quite pinpoint, first of all, what that is inside, and second of all, where to find it, right? It's almost like a longing that is there, but we kind of try to either deny that longing and cover it over with just keeping busy, or going as far as, taking drugs to kind of fulfill that even for a short period of time, to don't feel that longing anymore. And so the Three Feathers came out of that. Joshua A. Long, the little rooster who is the main character, A. Long is because he is longing for that, whatever is missing inside him, and he wants to find it. And I have been since my early 20s, on that journey of just finding, slowly but surely discovering little pieces here and there of myself that, make the whole, that whole, like WHOLE, in the end, hopefully. So yeah, that's why that was definitely a representation of the perils of that journey, because it does get dark, at times, when you kind of a little bit even just let go of the outside journey and don't look so much to have satisfaction somehow on the outside and look more inward. It's a pretty scary prospect.
Do you ever wish you could go back to that time when nobody knew that you were a writer and nobody expected anything from you? Nobody asked you, "Hey, Stefan, when's the 3rd book in that trilogy going to come out? Are you going to make me cry again?" When you're just sitting at your computer and you're writing the story for you, and maybe one day somebody else will read it and that'll be reward enough. Those are special times. I look back, when I was writing Bloom, and I wrote that for my wife and kids, and
right.
If somebody else read it, wonderful, whatever. But I'm always looking for ways to kind of recapture that early joy,
right.
And that desire to do a thing just to do it. Do you ever find yourself like that?
Yes. The thing is, though, I agree with you. I mean, right now there are 4 people that know what I'm writing. So, there's you, Amy, myself, and maybe one other person. So it's not like that much pressure that I'm under. Maybe a little bit more than before, but not that much more. But
wait till this airs.
Well, but I think the thing is, though, with the first book, yes, you're totally kind of in the dark, and it's a really cool feeling to have no pressure. But on the other hand, because it's the first one, I remember Amy's daughter Layla. She was 10 at the time when I wrote The Three Feathers, and without her comments, I would not have finished it, because I thought, like, first of all, who am I writing this for? where is the story even going? Why do I even have to finish it? Only until after halfway through, it became clear that it's like, holy moly, I have to finish it. And it was like this commitment was growing on my part. But it was only there because Layla was saying, she wrote, I gave her stuff to read, and she wrote like little comments like, intriguing and great, or some comments. And I'm like, oh my God, so I have to finish it. But I feel less pressure now because I know I can do it. I don't have that doubt anymore. The doubt was the first, the fourth stage and the three feathers was still, I doubted just my ability to even finish a book and have a cohesive story, that doesn't go all over the place. And now I know I can do it, and my confidence has increased. And because I'm still an unknown, I'm still serious. I don't have pressure to, how's the third book going to turn out? I have a bunch of people that are looking forward to it, but if they wouldn't read it, they would survive. They wouldn't, there wouldn't be any damage or whatever. They would live their lives. It's nothing really. So I don't have that pressure.
That's awesome.
Still.
And
yeah.
When accomplishment replaces those early feelings of inadequacy and stuff like that, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Right. Yeah.
Talking about Layla and the feedback that you get from youngsters, you do a lot of school events and read and teach kids about the creative process and stuff like that. What are some of the best questions that you get from kids?
Oh my God. Well, one, I mean, there was one question that still haunts me because in the Three Feathers, one of the main characters dies in the end. And it's not like a terrible death because he kind of moves on and we know where he's going and everything. It's good in a way, but it's also a little, it's like a little Bambi-ish. And the one question of this third grader, this girl, she asked me, because I get thank you notes from when I go to the class and I read, and then the teacher gives me afterwards. I come in and I sign books, and then they give me thank you cards from the students, from the kids. And one of the girls said, "How dare you? How dare you let grade die?" And I was like, "Oh my God, now that's pressure."
I'm upset with you. How dare you?
How dare you? It's like, oh God, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That was, I think, the worst one. That was the worst one.
That's fantastic. Dave Rudden was on the show the other day, and he does a lot of school events too, and especially middle graders. And he said it's so funny because you talk to a group of like 14, 15-year-olds, and you talk about the, that you can be a writer too, and they all kind of stare at their shoes, and they're like, right. Maybe. You talk to a bunch of 10-year-olds, and like, well, yeah, I mean, I've written 5 already.
Exactly. You're so right. It is amazing.
There's this thing like before you're a teenager and, maybe it's all the peer pressure, maybe it's just crazy hormones, whatever it is, but there's something about that innocence of being a kid and feeling like I can do anything and my imagination is just as great as yours. Do you see that when you're interacting with kids at school that they feel like that writing is not so much magic, like maybe older kids do?
I think that period, that teenage period is terrible. You know what I mean? It's there, but it's, I mean, I when I go to 3rd and 4th grade, they are so, like, there is nothing holding them back. They're so authentic and clear and like, they're so engaged and they love it. They love it with all their being, whatever they do. And, it's like with that question, how dare you? It came from the depth of that girl's soul, And then you lose that. I think when, the teenage years, you lose stuff. I mean, you gain stuff on the other end, obviously, but that is the time where you're stuck in that time where like, oh my God, what's going on with me? And I totally see that when in the beginning, I remember I was reading, that was my biggest mistake I've ever done in schools, because this one person said, oh, you could read to our sixth graders. And I think it's 6th and 7th grade. And the only book I had back then was The Three Feathers. So there was a gymnasium packed with 6th graders. And it was probably about 200 students. And I didn't realize that back then that The Three Feathers has its prime audience is the 3rd and the 4th grade, and then adults. 5th graders maybe, but 6th graders, they're already on to Twilight and Hunger Games and whatever. So you're not, and I barely made it through that 35 minutes. I was like, oh my God. I mean, you always have one or two that are avid readers no matter what you give them, no matter what you talk about, they love reading so much that it doesn't matter. They're like, your number one, your only audience out of 150 are those three, that love reading. The rest is like, what do you mean a fable? Hello, get a life, old man, whatever. But
Right.
but we do.
What is this fable you talk of?
Exactly. So, anyway, but those are just the adventures of authors in the real world, which is good.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the things that that really makes it all worth it, that to get to see a kid light up when you start talking about the thing they love, or you write a story and they write you a note. How dare you?
Oh my God, totally.
That's heart-wrenching, but at the same time you've got to be on the inside going, yes,
oh my God,
I did it. Did it.
You cry, but you say, I did it.
Right.
It's twisted.
It is twisted. It's wonderful. Well, Stefan, our hour is up.
Oh my God.
I know it's been crazy. I hope your NaNoWriMo is a success. I know it will be. You've always knocked it out of the park. Are you on schedule so far?
I'm a little behind.
Well,
I'm a little behind schedule, but I also have written some of it before, so I can cheat a little bit.
Yeah, there you go.
But don't say anything.
The words. Your secret is safe with me.
And with all the other listeners that are now listening to you.
That's right. Shh. Stefan, where can everybody find you?
Facebook is the best one, and then stefanbolz.thirdscribe.com. But my author page on Facebook, I have worked on it, so that's probably the best way to catch me.
I'll link them up both in the show notes. If you're looking for Stefan, just click on the link in the show notes and you'll find him. And he will make you cry as well. So, thanks for hanging out with me, buddy.
Thanks, you too. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
Jason ate Thanksgiving dinner alone at the Horseman restaurant. He had the place to himself. Everyone else had somewhere to be. He picked at his burger and fries, thinking of meals past. Thanksgiving had always been Eliza's favorite holiday, as Halloween had always been his. Jason glanced at the menu propped at his elbow. The horseman with his hand held high, carrying a tray with burgers and a shake. The horseman he'd seen on Halloween was no cartoon. That horseman was a thing of crematorium ash, of grave clothes and withered grass, riding a horse of autumn leaves and snail shells and pieces of skull. Jason's hand rose to the tender stripe of skin on his neck. The hatchet cut. "You okay, honey?" Jennifer, the waitress, appeared at his elbow. She had dyed her hair since he'd first met her. A pink stripe ran through the gray now, as if she had stuck her head in a cotton candy machine. "Yeah, I'm full." She raised an eyebrow. "That bad, huh?" Jason glanced at his plate, still piled with food. "Just not hungry." "You know, I saw the Headless Horseman once," said Jennifer, refreshing Jason's cup. She glanced about, deciding something. She set the pot down on a nearby table and slid into Jason's booth with some difficulty, sucking her belly in. "I've seen him," she whispered. "Just like you." "When?" "Oh, 10 years ago." Jason glanced around to see if the cooks or busboys were watching, to see if she was playing a prank. "Where?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "East of here. Sam and I used to live out on Sawmill River Road. I worked at my daddy's Applebee's franchise, you know? It's still there. Daddy sold it, though. It was around Halloween time and I was coming off shift. It had been a night, believe me. Parties of like 20. We sang to the little brats, 'Happy, happy birthday' from all of us at Applebee's. The Horseman? Right." She produced cigarettes. "Do you mind?" Jason shook his head. "Thanks. Don't tell the smoke police." Jason slid the saucer from beneath his coffee mug to serve as an ashtray. It was about midnight, probably. I counted my tips. And those little bastards stiff you, by the by. So I wasn't in a good mood. I was waiting for Sam to pick me up. I was smoking in the parking lot, trying not to catch my hair on fire, and I heard this thunder, coming down the Picantico Hills from the direction of the hollow. Rumble, 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 but it was clear out, and the sound got closer and closer. We had a full moon that night, hanging over the top of the ridge, and I saw him come up the other side, this black shape on a horse, fast as the devil late for church. He was down the hill before I knew it, coming right at me, and he jumped Sawmill River, kaboom! And when he reached the parking lot, I saw. She drew one finger across her neck. Nothing. No head. And it wasn't any real horse, either. Too damn fast. He was in a hurry. Didn't even see me. Whoosh! My apron blew up. The dumpster started rolling. Car alarms. Blew out my damn cigarette. He shot across the field. Beeline, due east. Never saw anything like it. So... She patted Jason's hand. "I know you're getting laughed at. But not by me." She stubbed her cigarette in the saucer. "Some of us believe you."